I first want to thank Irgun Shirei Torah for asking me to give this shir. Shovim, of course, the Arizal says, is the time for a person to work on himself, to do tshuva for various things, and it's become a minhag over the last couple of years, perhaps already almost 20 years, to specifically work on Taharas Hamishpacha during this time period. As I mentioned on Shabbos, my Rosh Kolo, Rav Hershel Shechter Shlita, mentioned to my father, who's been saying shirim like this for more years than I, when my father asked Rav Hershel Shechter what topic he should concentrate on. If you only have one or two times to say shiurim, what should he focus on? He said, focus on the harchokis, Siman Kuf Tzadi Hey, because often those are things that people forget. As the years go on in a person's marriage, they start to forget some of these dinim. After people have a baby, so the wife goes to the mikveh, and then she's tahara for a long time, and then they become pregnant again, have another baby, and nursing, and so on. They just seem to forget over all the lapses many of the harchakis, and therefore there's a need to review. I'm just going to ask, in order to try to get through as much as I can, as quickly as I can, if people have questions, just to hold off and write them down and submit them to me afterwards. I could always use them in the shir that will be next week, Be'ez Hashem, to try to cover all that. By way of introduction, the Torah and Chazal gave us a number of harchakis, distancings, to enable us to renew our marriages monthly. The Gemara says in Nidan Daf Lamed Aleph, that when a woman goes to the mikveh, she's comparable to a kala on her wedding night. It's a way of renewing the marriage. Even psychologists recognize the beauty of the nida system and how it truly does preserve marriages. When we're talking about the harchakis, it always sounds like a very negative thing. Don't do this, don't do that, stay away, stay away, stay away. And I usually like to at least frame it in a positive way by saying that since Chazal understood that these activities have to be osir because they are margil la'avera, meaning they entice a couple to get carried away. So therefore, these activities should actually be encouraged, b'shas heter. And all we have to do to frame it positively is whatever isurim we're talking about here, a person should actually utilize at times that it's mutter. These are supposed to be dvarim shel chiba that should go on between husband and wife, and also that happens often as marriages go on. You hit 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, many of the endearances can be forgotten and sparks can be reunited by simply understanding these harchakis. I'm going to give you one exaggerated example, but I actually used it one time very successfully. I do too much marriage counseling, and one of the things that hit me once while talking to a particular couple was to tell them in the middle of the conversation with them, I just said to them, have you ever tried dancing? And they looked at me like I was crazy, and I looked at myself like I was crazy for saying it. And this was a yeshivish couple. I said, I don't mean publicly, obviously. I mean privately. And I explained to them what was just coming into my mind, what I meant by that, in the privacy of their own home, what I meant by dancing. And I remember that Rav Victor Miller, Zechatzarek Levracha, used to say that dancing is basically, this is almost an exact quote, having tashmish standing up and fully clothed. He was trying to say how it's a very negative thing in the Goyish Welt, but the truth is, ein ma'aseh chiba yoser mizeh. There's no greater ma'aseh chiba, and therefore I told that to this couple, who told me later it actually saved their marriage. It was just an amazing thing. So that's an exaggerated example, but it's true with all of the activities that we're going to mention tonight. That in the right context could be great for a relationship. So I'll begin my post-hakdama by saying that this is a great challenge, what I have to do right now. I have to make sure that you walk out of here tonight saying to yourself it was worth coming. And it's very easy with a shir like this for a person to say, why did I show up? Because if I mention things, and I can mention 100 things, but you say, I knew all that already, why did I show up? On the other hand, if I mention things that don't sound familiar to you, you say, 1 second, I never heard of that before. I obviously don't hold that way. Why did I show up? So what I have to try to do are find examples of things that you knew and forgot over the years, and hopefully then with this chazara I can remind you and we can be back to square one. Final thing I have to say is that everything I'm going to say tonight is lanias daiti, It's called for many sources. When I learned Hilchos Nida in yeshiva, we used the Bari HaShulchan. It was supplemented by actually my Rosh Kolo's father, Rav Melech Shechter Zichron Levrach, who gave the Shurim in Hilchos Nida. Following that, though, I did a lot more work using specifically the Baal Shevet HaLevi. Is tremendous. His Sfarim are tremendous. Rav Vosner from Bnei Brak, and I found that his Sfarim actually speak to me a lot more than the Bari HaShulchan. Besides that, there are others. Rabbi Eider published many years ago with his extensive footnotes of discussions that he had with Rav Moshe Feinstein and other poskim of that door, and many discussions I've had both with my father and other poskim, both in Flatbush and in my yeshiva. So I'm not going to quote by each specific psak. This I heard from Rav Belsky, this I heard from Rav Chaim Kraus, this I heard from Rav Feivel Cohen. I'm just going to go through it. Many of these things are machlokes, be very honest with you, but I'm going to try to stay away from saying it's machlokes. I'm just going to tell you what my understanding was after going through the sources and getting a feel for the dinim as we learn them. The first halacha that I want to mention is a person is supposed to compliment their wife, and when a person compliments their wife on how they dress or how they look, that could be taken as a form of endearment. Nevertheless, it's not considered chiba if it's a compliment that you would have given to your mother, or you would have given to your sister. Oh, that's a beautiful necklace. Or you're dressed really nice tonight for the chasana. If that's the type of thing you would have said to your own mother, your own sister, it's not considered divrei chiba to say that to your wife. The phrase of "I love you," quote unquote, which perhaps is used so much in this day and age by people that it has almost no meaning, nevertheless, it's something that should not be said between husband and wife, b'shas nida. However, to sign a note, love, David, that is considered appropriate. That's just a formality. That's not something that's considered endearing. Another halacha, even though some people are machmir, the minhag ha'olam is to permit taking a walk on Shabbos together, even if it's simply to relax and to enjoy each other's company. It was famously said in the name of Moshe Feinstein that he didn't like certain things that allowed the couple to have a good time. That's how he spelled it, good time. But most poskim felt that that's not the way it is, and such a thing as a Shabbos walk, again, even just to relax and to enjoy each other's company, is something that the minhag ha'olam seems to permit. A couple may take pictures of each other. Also, they may play games. Now, there are different types of games. There are games that are a little bit more intellectual. You could talk about a Scrabble game or a chess game. So there's definitely more room to be makel to play such games if there's a need to cheer one's wife up or even to cheer oneself up. That's not considered chiba, in my understanding. Cheering up is part of what couples are supposed to do for each other. However, it gets a little bit more difficult if we get to stam we want to play, which very quickly can become we're playing to have fun. And to have fun is apparently more than to have a good time. So one has to be somewhat careful with games that are even intellectual in type to make sure that when they're playing it, if it is b'shas nida, that it's not being played to have fun, but it's simply what we would call stam, or to cheer each other up. However, games that are much more active and the whole game is fun, could be almost any type of card game or things like that that are more based in chance than, or games with dice than are games of strategy. Those games by definition are fun. And therefore the whole reason why it's being played is really fun. And as such, it definitely is something that can lead to more, and in my understanding, that would be chiba. People have asked me about playing ping pong, and that's interesting because we will talk a little bit later about passing things to each other, which is obviously a problem, b'shas nida. And here you're not trying to pass. If anything, you're playing ping pong, you're trying to hit it away from the opponent. But nevertheless, it's the type of game that, when you play with friends, you play with your children, you see it's a lot of fun. So when a person plays with their wife, if their wife's better than them or much worse than them, that might change it. But if it's a game of that sort, it's really fun, and something that's fun is not necessarily appropriate during that time period. A person wants to bring a flower or a bouquet of flowers for Shabbos to their wife, even though she's a nida, it's absolutely fine. It does not have to be a bouquet. It should not be a bouquet That's the type of thing you buy when you get engaged, or the amount of flowers they have at a wedding. It should not be a huge amount, but one flower, a small bouquet of flowers, it's really covered Shabbos. Of course, you don't hand it to your wife, put it down on the table and so on, as we'll get to and as we know, but it's definitely mutter. Even a birthday gift, which is definitely being given for her. It's not for the fact that she was born. It's for her. I always say by birthdays, this is one of my chidushim, the children should really be calling up the parents and wishing them mazel tov. Thank you for giving birth to me so-and-so amount of years ago. After all, they did the hard work of raising you. Why are you celebrating a birthday? What did you do to get there? You remained alive, so thank Hashem. It's not something to really throw a party for. But since the minig is to celebrate birthdays, and we know even poskim, Rav Moshe Feinstein used to call grandchildren to wish them a happy birthday, a birthday gift is not considered chibah, it's considered almost something you have to do, as long as it's small. So a brand new car, unless you're a billionaire, is not small, but a small gift, I can't give a number, $20, $30, I don't know what number, it depends on the person, whatever is considered a small gift would be mutter. Not only that, a birthday card can be given separately or included with such a gift. And the card could even be signed love. Again, as we said before, that's not really chibah, that's the formal way that husbands and wives speak to each other. It's not the type of thing that's going to start things rolling. A husband and wife can use various items of each other, even while she is in nida. They can use the same bar of soap in the shower. They can use the same toothpaste. I don't know if people like doing this, but they could use the same bath towel, the same bathrobe. They could use the same comb. I even saw some poskim who saying it makes sense. They could use the same toothbrush. I don't know if people like to do that in general, but it doesn't mean any additional chibah. It's just using those regular things that we have around the house, and we are husband and wife, we share these things. A man may prepare his wife's clothing for her. I don't know how many women would necessarily like their husbands to pick out what dress they're going to wear for a wedding or even to go to work, but it would be mutter if that would be the case, but preferably a man should not be preparing his wife's undergarments. Lanias daiti, laundering is mutter at all times. That would include undergarments. So if the husband is doing the laundry, he's allowed to do the laundry for everything, and the wife also, of course, to do the laundry for everything. When it comes to matters of wine, I know we're going from one topic to the other. When it comes to matters of wine, so Shulchan Aruch says that a man may not send a specific cup of wine to his wife, even al yedei shliach, even if she's in another room, unless he never touched the wine. He just tells, let's say, the waiter or the person who made Kiddush, can you please send to my wife? Now that could easily occur. I ask you, send to her. As long as I don't touch it, that would be okay. But as soon as I'm touching it, then that specific thing I have my thoughts on, and even if my wife is somewhere else, it would be usher to send her that cup of wine. Kiddush, therefore, on Shabbos is a big problem. And all young couples go through this, trying to figure out what in the world they're supposed to do at Kiddush. Firstly, when they're alone. And that is actually talked about a lot in the poskim. And unfortunately, what's not talked about a lot in the poskim is, what are you supposed to do when you're a guest at somebody's house, like your parents and your in-laws? Let's start with what happens at home. So, at home, what could be done, the husband makes Kiddush, and he's really supposed to drink from his kos. The problem is that there is a halacha that one is not supposed to pour drinks for their spouse. So if I have my cup for Kiddush, and I made Kiddush on it, and I have an empty cup, and I want to pour into my wife's cup for her, I now have poured for her. And if I pass it to her, I have now passed to her. Two separate Isurei D'Rabbanan. I could do that on a regular Shabbos, b'shas heter, but b'shas nidus, you can't do that. So what do? One possibility is, who says that she has to drink from your cup or have anything to do with your cup? The truth is, she can have her own wine or even grape juice that she poured herself, and you make Kiddush, and if she feels she has to have, she can drink straight from there. There is a mitzvah min ha-muvchar that Shulchan mentions to drink specifically from the kos shel bracha. Okay, so now what do? So either you don't do that mitzvah min ha-muvchar, Or you could do the following. The husband could drink from the kos that he is using for Kiddush, and he could put it down. He's not passing it to her. He didn't pour anything for her. He poured the wine really for himself before he made Kiddush. A woman is allowed to drink the shiare kos, the leftovers, from the husband. That's definitely true by all other liquids besides wine. There's some who are machmir for it by wine. So if you want to be machmir, I'm not saying that you have to be, there is another possibility. And also sometimes women don't like to drink even from you yourself just drank from, germs, whatever it is. So a possibility is like this. If I'm drinking, again, this is just me and my wife at home, I drink and I make Kiddush, but I make Kiddush, before I drink, I pour some into another cup, 1 second. But I thought I can't pour anything. So poskim say, Shevet HaLevi says, that if you're just pouring a drop, that's all that's needed for the mitzvah min hamuvchar that she's trying to get for drinking from your kos shel bracha, just a drop, that's not considered pouring, and it might not even be considered a serious passing. Nevertheless, you don't have to pass it. You pour it into the cup, you put that cup down. So there's no passing. She goes and she picks up the cup. In terms of pouring is not a pour unless it's like, a downpour. It's got to rain a little bit. Just a drop is not considered pouring. So that's what I usually recommend to young couples in yeshiva. My talmidim, when they get married, they ask me. So I tell them, that's what you do. Just pour off a drop, put it down, and then she'll drink that drop. And of course, she has to wait till you drink from the kos first. That's the best way to do it. If you're dealing with guests around the table, this is probably a situation by all of us, when you have many people around the table, there's a much easier solution. You can, before drinking from the becher, after you make hagafen, you could pour as much as you want into one cup, that's then going to be poured into many smaller cups. Or you could take time and pour into all the smaller cups, but it could be a hefsek with the bracha and the drinking. So the best thing is, pour off into a big cup, drink, and then from that big cup you pour into multiple cups. You do not then say, send this to mommy. That you can't do. But you send the multiple cups downstream, and it'll get there. And as long as there isn't a specified cup that you're sending to your wife, there is no problem. You use multiple cups. One of the first purchases that one Rosh Yeshiva in my yeshiva told me that he did when he got married was he got a silver tray and silver cups. That way he'd always pour into the little cups and then pass along that tray. You don't have to have, there's no hiddur mitzvah for this. You don't have to have silver. But the idea is a very good one. That way the multiple cups are going and there's no specific cup. So what happens if the couple is alone, there are no children, and they are guests by somebody else's house? Or there are children there, but the children are at one end of the table, and the couple is sitting in such a way that they're right next to each other, and the person who made Kiddush, now I guess he has on his right side you, and to your right side is your wife, and he takes some of the Kiddush himself, and he passes one little cup of wine to you. And we know the appropriate thing to do, derech eretz, you have to pass the wine on. And since the wine is not a mitzvah itself, people don't realize what is by challah. The challah is actually a mitzvah. So when the person cuts challah and gives it to somebody, they shouldn't really be passing it on. They might be being over on a mitzvah. They really should have themselves. But with wine, it's only mitzvah min hamufchar to drink. It's not a mitzvah per se. So yeah, you do the proper thing and you give it on to the next person. But the next person is my wife. I can't pass it to her. What am I supposed to do? So the simple thing to do is to wait until a second small cup is poured. And then you take the 2 cups and you put that to your right in between you and your wife. Neither one is designated for her. She picks the one she wants and you take the other one. And if anybody starts thinking, why is he doing that? I don't know. He got distracted in the middle of one cup and the other. I forgot to pass it. I had I don't know. You didn't have a conversation because you're not talking. And then you just take the 2 cups and you put. That's the best way to do it. Poskim don't talk about what to do in that situation. That's the best answer that I had over the years. If anybody has any other suggestions, please let me know. As we mentioned, a husband and wife cannot pour drinks for each other, except for plain water. Plain water is not chashuv, so it doesn't cause any thoughts to happen. Even if one requests it from the other. Please pour me a cup of apple juice. I can't do that. However, it is mutter to do al yedei shinui. So if you usually would pour with your right hand, you would be allowed to pour it with your left hand. Furthermore, it should be served with the weak hand. this is husband to wife or wife to husband. So a person usually would put something down with their right hand, they should dafka put it down with their left, and some even say it might be better to put it down with both hands, but that's sometimes very uncomfortable. So the weak hand should be used. Also, it should not be put in front of the spouse. That's all the way the poskim say it, in front of. So what does it mean in front of? So I view it as a square, the strike zone. You got the strike zone in front of you. That's where you don't really have to reach anywhere in order to get something. So if it's put outside the strike zone, then you have to reach a little bit. That would be the appropriate place for a wife to serve a husband, or a husband to serve a wife, their drink. It's the same thing with food during this time period. The halacha also is, if the spouse is not looking or isn't there, sometimes I'm preparing or whatever I'm doing, learning in my office, and my wife wants to serve dinner. So she'll start serving everybody, and she'll call me and say, please come upstairs. And I don't always come right away. And I'll come up to the table, and everything is all set and ready to go, and often covered because they have no idea how long it'll take till I get there, and to keep things hot. And it's all completely set, perfectly set, everything in place. Because if you're not there, then there's no problem. Then you could set up everything right in the strike zone where it's easiest to get to. The halacha actually is that the wife can say to the husband, or the husband to the wife, depending on the situation, please look the other way. And then you could pour for them. Because these are all drabanan, so ha'aramas are generally tricks, are generally mutter. So it's very simple. Please look over there. And then you pour. Please look over there. You can put things down in exactly the right place. A bottle or a platter in which everyone will serve into their own plate or cup can be placed on the table without a shinui. So that means if you have a serving platter that's going to go into the middle of the table, that's something that can be done, provided that the way that people serve themselves is by taking from that plate and putting it onto their own plate before they start eating it. If a husband or wife is serving each other sugar to put into tea, or a tea bag to put into the water of tea, that should only be done with a shinui. So, again, if the cup is sitting already in front, and the person usually would use the right hand, use the left. Simple enough shinui. One of the halachas that get very quickly forgotten, I think, by a lot of people when it comes to eating together is the heker. Heker, which is supposed to remind us that we're b'shas isser now, that one's wife is in nida. And the truth is, any time that we're eating at the same table, even if it's just a snack or a coffee, if the husband and wife are sitting at the same table eating, and they're both eating, then, or both drinking, there has to be a heker. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein held that it was even needed to have a heker, even if there are other people present. If those people are adults, even if they're children, he really held that you have to have a heker all the time. Now, there are many poskim who say, including Rabbi Wazner, who says that if it's ef shalahachmir, you can be mekel. Meaning, if it's very difficult sometimes. Kids start asking, what in the world is that? What is that? What's going on? Every time you're even a guest in somebody else's house, you have to have a heker. And people realize this very quickly during Sheva Brachas. Because usually, not all the time, but usually, Kala is already usher sometime in the middle of Sheva Brachas, beginning, middle. I'm dealing with one person now who's married months already. And having a hard time, what can I tell you? But usually, sometime during Sheva Brachas, the wife becomes usher to the husband, and they already have to try to figure out what to do. They're going to the next Sheva Brachas, everybody's watching them. And what are they going to do? What kind of heker are they have to sit together, and what kind of heker are they going to put on the table? And technically, a heker is supposed to be a tefach high. It has to be noticeable. It has to be something that looks out of place. So what are you supposed to do? So Chassan Kala already, they start to worry, what are they supposed to do? And I'm hoping, I remember I was not told at the time, well, you're going to have this problem, you have to realize we just learned the dinner, we had no idea what we were supposed to do. I was lucky, it was in California, and a very big posik there of Gershon Bess was able to help me with a lot of these things. Just practically, a lot of times things are just not taught in the, Chassan classes, Kala classes. Here's the basic halacha, now what? Now what do I do? It's a very difficult situation. So various kulas developed in order to try to even make Rav Moshe Feinstein happy, so to speak. Though I don't know if any of these were ever asked to him directly. The simplest kula, not simple in every situation, but the simplest kula is if the wife will sit in a different place as a nida than she does regularly. Let's say the husband and wife, they're eating alone, and he usually sits at one point of the table, and she sits on his right side. B'shas nida, she could go to the left side. That would be enough. Rabbi Eider doesn't like that if they're alone, but if you're in a group, he already says, I think even Rav Moshe would agree. But between the factor that she's in a different position from what you're used to, and there's so many people around, so what's going to happen already? So therefore, he felt, and I agree with that, he doesn't need my haskama, but this is what I thought, that that would be enough of a heker. Also, what could be mentioned is a heker, and Rabbi Eider goes through the same cheshbon, that if it's smaller than a tefach, chassan watch, or a salt shaker. Salt shaker is already pretty high, it's not quite a tefach. A ring that can be put down. You got to be careful with rings because they get thrown off the table and they get lost very quickly. It happened to us more than once. Rings are not a safe thing to use necessarily as a heker. So in private, again, Rabbi Eider says, what are you talking about? What kind of heker is that? In private, it's not going to remind you of anything. But in public, plus that, Rabbi Eider conceded, and he felt that even Rav Moshe would agree that that would be adequate as a heker. If it's possible, and this is a much simpler solution, if there are children, and people are dealing with that, with children at home, the children should sit between the husband and the wife. They shouldn't sit near each other. Husband sits at one side of the table, wife sits on the other side of the table, and all the children in between, and then there isn't any issue. They can sit at the same table without any heker. Also, a simple solution is placemats. I only figured this out. We were married a few years. We were eating by Rav Hershel Shechter. My wife and I were eating by Rav Hershel Shechter, and we realized every single Shabbos, they always had placemats under everybody's dishes. And even though they had a tablecloth, we just thought they were doing it for some fancy or something. Every single one had a separate placemat. And there were many couples who used to come and eat. He was our Rosh Kolo, so we ate by him many, many times. And the couples usually sat next to each other. And we didn't realize that it was being done on purpose until one time my wife and I went and asked the Rebbetzin. We didn't ask him, but we asked the Rebbetzin. She said, that's why we do it, because we want to invite the couples. They shouldn't start looking around, what are we supposed to do? So they always, even if there are no couples, that's the way they raised their family. They always had placemats by the table. Like fancy placemat, looks like it's fancy, but it was really done for the sake of the couples, not to feel uncomfortable, and to always have that heker. So 2 separate placemats is definitely a heker. There is a machlokes about if one person's eating on the tablecloth and another is eating on the table itself. My impression is that is a heker. That it's a little unusual for one to be eating on the table, one to be eating on the tablecloth, and therefore that should be able to count as a heker. No additional heker would be needed. Sometimes people we tried this in the beginning of our marriage till they both broke. Somebody gave us a set of 2 beautiful glass Borei Priar Gofen glasses. And I remember one of my sisters-in-law, who got married a year or so after us, she said to my wife out loud, maybe we were married 2 or 3 years at that point, she said, I never understood why sometimes you just had that glass sitting on the table and sometimes you didn't have it sitting on the table. Now I understand. So sometimes people realize things, after they get married, but often beforehand they don't realize, and that's something that also can be used. So if it's an unusual kli, then that could be also something that's on the table. It could be something designated only to be used at certain times. When b'shas nidus, that could be used as a heker, even if it's going to be used during that meal. Meaning, I could be using that wine cup. Nevertheless, since it's only there b'shas nidus, it's the only time that it's used, so therefore it would still act as a heker, and that would be adequate. Okay, there are poskim, as I said before, if Shmuel Vosner is makel, not to require a heker when there are others around, even if those others are anywhere over the age of 6. But he himself says it's only if ef shalahachmir, only if you have no way out. Otherwise, it pays to use the above eitzes that we mentioned. I think this begins with something that's obvious to us, that we cannot eat from the same plate. But that's true even if the plate is so large that it has separate compartments to it that are actually built into the plate, and even if in each compartment is a different type of food. And this is true even if others are also sharing from that plate. So you can have such a thing. People come to somebody's house on Onik Shabbos, Amalav Malka, so the men are on one side of the table, the women on the other, a big dining room table in between, but there's a big dish in the middle, and you want to take from one side, and your wife wants to take from the other. And it's all one big dish, even with separate compartments, even with separate foods in each one, and that could be a problem. That could happen. The key is that whenever you're taking from a serving plate, you should always take from the serving plate and put it onto your own plate. As a machlokas a poskim, if it's enough to put it onto the tablecloth. Let's say like challah. Challah gets cut and gets put in the middle of the table, sometimes, on some sort of a challah tray. And now that's the serving tray. I want to take a piece, my wife wants to take a piece, and we both just start eating it. Can't do that. That's both of us taking from the same plate. So I put it down on the table next to me. So some poskim say that's not enough. It has to actually go on your plate. If you have, by very fancy people, they have a bread plate. They have a separate plate just for the bread. So you can take it, put it on your bread plate, or you put it on your regular plate. But it's definitely better not just to put it down on the tablecloth, even though there are poskim definitely are makil. But it's not so hard to just put it onto your regular plate, and that cancels whatever it is, as if you're both eating from the same plate. So a person has a piece of chicken or salad. There's a salad bowl. Everyone's taking from the salad bowl. Salad gets put onto your own plate, and your wife puts it onto her own plate. This is true, and the separate plates thing is true, even if the husband and wife are eating alone. That eating on separate plates is mevatel, taking it from a serving plate. What if you have a bag of popcorn, pretzels, or potato chips? So obviously, you can't both eat from the same bag. Definitely not simultaneously. You can touch hands. But even one after the other, it's eating from the same plate. So now let's say a simple solution is just take the bag and pour some onto one plate and pour some onto another plate and let the kids eat the rest. But if you ate already from the bag, and then your wife comes into the room, she says, I also want some. So at what point is the bag no longer a serving bag that the wife can now say, I want to take some too? So the simple answer to that is that when that eating session is over for you, it can now start for her. So if you're done eating from that bag, you would roll it up maybe, or just say, I'm done, I'm not taking any more. At that point, she would be able to eat, even if you still have some chips or peanuts or popcorn in your hand. There are poskim who say that she's supposed to wait until it's totally eaten from your hand, but I don't know if that's necessary. They talk about this by hors d'oeuvres, when you have also by a wedding, and the waitress or waiter is walking around with hors d'oeuvres, and the husband and wife both want to take. So the husband takes, and the wife goes, uh-oh, can I take also? We're both eating the hors d'oeuvres, the little hot dogs on the toothpicks, we're both eating from the same plate. Can we do that? So there are those who say, as long as the husband took everything he's going to take from that waiter or waitress, he's done taking, he's all done, then she's allowed to take. There are those who say no, she shouldn't take until he eats everything from there. But my understanding is that as long as he has taken and he has decided, this is all I'm taking, that's all his wife lets him take, so he's done with his eating session, and then she would be allowed to eat from that hors d'oeuvre platter or from that potato chips, pretzels, or popcorn bag. There is an exception that when you have a fruit bowl of large whole fruit, like apples or oranges, then the husband could take one apple and the wife could take one orange. However, when it comes to finger food like cherries and grapes, that remains usur. Now, exactly why, it may have to do with the fact that small things may come back for more, and therefore they're not done with that session. It also might be, I don't want to get too much into the lumdis, I said I was going to do a lot of dinner, but it also might be that when it comes to taking an apple or an orange, my hand is now my plate. So I have really taken it and put it on another plate. When it comes to a cherry, a finger food, the finger's not a plate. That's how you eat it. It's a finger food. It's true, this is how you eat the apple also, but the apple is a big thing, the orange is a big thing. That might be technically like a plate. A piece of chicken or schnitzel, this is sometimes an issue. Some Sometimes after my wife is done cooking and everything, she doesn't necessarily take everything from the pots or the frying pan. She doesn't take out every single meatball or every single piece of schnitzel and serve it. Some is still left in the pot. So I would go over afterwards, usually with a fork. I do have some derech eretz, but it could be 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It's cold. I don't care. I'm hungry. I take the fork and I eat. And then I think to myself, 1 second, what I just did was I made this whole pot now is my thing. And who says that that's the only meatball I'm going to take? I may come back for more. It's 10:30 is early at night. So at what point? That is not taking it and putting it into my plate. That's not. It's a little impolite.
Even if she's not in the room, in the vicinity, it's like you're declaring this pot
is still mine, yeah, to some extent. But when it comes to, again, these things, it's different than an apple or an orange. Apple and orange, again, once it's in the hand, that's like a plate. But something like a piece of schnitzel, the fact that it's impolite, that's not the way you take it. Take a piece of schnitzel, start eating it like an ice cream cone. So that's not really putting it into a plate. So I don't think that breaks the connection. And she would not be able to then go to the pot and take another meatball. I'll take one meatball, she'll take another meatball. You can't do that. That would be, again, inappropriate. Things like salt in a salt shaker, butter in the middle of the table, ketchup or mayonnaise, all sorts of condiments. If it's in a container that you take to your plate and you don't necessarily pour it onto the plate, but you pour it right onto your food, that would be still okay. It might be better to pour it right onto the plate, but it's definitely okay to pour it right onto the food. However, let's say you have a dip for salad or a ketchup dip in the middle of the table. So I do not recommend both dipping, one after the other after the other. In a sense, what you're doing is the dip is something that you are each eating from that plate. You're eating it the way it's normally eaten, on a celery stick or a carrot stick or whatever it is. That is the normal way of eating it, but you are now eating from the same plate, so that should not be done. But a serving container of ketchup, even to put it directly, or salt, to put it directly onto the food, which I think is the minhag. Salt we don't usually put on the side except for challah, but salt we put directly on the food, that would be mutter to do. A husband and wife can share those things. A husband and wife, of course, should not drink from the same cup, even with 2 straws. I think that's even more endearing to drink with 2 straws. But that should not be done. However, it's important that we know that she can taste test the food before Shabbos or any time. The fact that she decided to take a spoonful of soup from the pot to see if it needs more salt, or she wanted to taste the kugel to see if it's done enough. I don't know enough about cooking, it's probably not necessary. But if she wanted to taste certain things, that taste, that te'ima ba'alma, does not make it that it's her kugel or her soup pot, and the husband can no longer have it. That would be mutter. I did see some poskim who say, since this could be a problem, therefore she shouldn't do it. It's the derech for women to do this, and if they don't do it, I don't know what the food's going to taste like. So there's definitely, I think, like the poskim who are makel here, that the women who are just doing a tima ba'alma, the husband should be able to eat from it afterwards. Okay, some of the topics that we're going to get to, as Hashem, next week, all the things that have to do with handing to each other. There's a lot to discuss there, and also in terms of sitting next to each other and traveling together, there are a lot of issues that come up. So Be'ez Hashem, we'll continue with that next week, and until then, thank you all for coming.
The tima, the tasting the dish for Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, it's a minhag that's almost enough.
It's a very strong, I don't know, it's all over, it's a very strong minhag for women to do it.
So no, but I've heard that men should do it also.
Really? To taste?
Part of preparation. They taste it also. It's like, a little more salt, a little more sugar, a little more